Buenas noches, amigos, y bienvenidos a Martes con Marisa, nuestro primer Martes con Marisa de 2023. Y me da muchísimo gusto saludarlos esta noche y presentarles a dos estrellas fulgurantes del firmamento, Jessica Rivera y Mark Carver. Es un dúo que ha grabado con nosotros ya 3 álbumes que han sido absolutamente maravillosos y que han recibido las mejores críticas nacionales e internacionales. Y ahorita vamos a hablar con ellos de nuestra última producción, que es un homenaje a Victoria de Los Ángeles. Está conmigo aquí Benjamín Juárez Echenique y, por supuesto, la fantástica soprano Jessica Rivera y el increíble pianista Mark Carver. Hello, guys. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Gracias. I feel like that in español. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and I am so looking forward to talking about this album.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
No, the pleasure is all ours. Let's talk a little bit about how this recording was born. How was this idea of paying a tribute to Victoria de Los Ángeles? I believe that you came to Boston and we had a conversation with Benjamin. And tell us about this, Jessica.
Well, I think that, Benjamin being the incredible resource, like really encyclopedic resource of musical knowledge that he is, we wanted to do another project together, and based on our previous experiences. And so we just had a conversation, and Benjamin had presented this idea, and I thought that's wonderful. I've always admired Victoria de Los Ángeles because I think something unique about her being Spanish, and that's also part of my heritage, my father being Peruvian, and me sort of exploring my heritage. I thought, wow, this is someone who looks like me. This is someone who sounds like me. This is someone who is like me, and someone who I very much look up to. And in doing some research about her and her life, I thought, oh, wow, we both started very young, and she was probably about 7, I think, when her sister was like, hey, we should present her. And I think she also knew very early on that she wanted to sing. She wanted to have a career. And when she first heard operatic music and art songs, she was inspired, just like I was. And so I felt like this is a perfect person to pay a tribute to, because she's been such an inspiration and an example of how it should be done.
And I think it's going to be more timely because this year we celebrate her centennial. She was born in 1923.
Perfect. Yeah, timing is everything.
So it's actually unintended, but it turned out to be perfect because it got delayed. The release of this album got delayed because of the pandemic and because of so many things that we all know, and it doesn't make any sense to explain them again. But the pandemic disrupted so many plans for everyone. But I think that earlier, before we started with this interview, with the recorded interview, you were talking about miracles, Jessica. And I think that this is one of the miracles of nowadays, the technology and what allows us to communicate and to be able to just reach every planet. And tonight we are celebrating the fact that we have already sent to the world this fantastic recording, and it's already in all the platforms. And I want to invite friends to just our favorite platform, Homenaje to Victoria de Los Ángeles, because it is a gem. Mark, what has it been for you to prepare this repertoire?
Well, for me, it was so inviting because, first of all, the repertoire on this disc is all repertoire that Victoria sang, and also repertoire that is perfectly suited for Jessica's Fach. And as soon as we started entertaining this idea, and Benjamin came up with this magnificent wealth of repertoire, because I think, Benjamin, you even knew her. Did you meet her or know her?
Not personally, but I did work closely with some of the pianists with her.
Okay.
She was very, very picky with her pianists. And of course, perhaps the greatest of the 20th century, Gerald Moore, chose her as one of the 3 singers for his farewell recital at Victoria at Royal Albert Hall. And the other 2 were Elizabeth Schwarzkopf and Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. So she was in very good company.
And that reminds me, I mean, I recant Gerald Moore all the time when I ask Jessica, am I too loud?
Which you tend never to be. You are truly a great collaborator. I mean, you are never overpowering anybody. You always prepare the softest bed for the voice to lie down, and it's just amazing, really.
That's truly a beautiful compliment, Marisa. And if anybody would know, you've heard me in concert halls, and you've heard me in headphones.
Yes, so definitely.
And I've fortunately had a beautiful partner to support in the process. Music was so inviting to me personally because so much of it I had done sketches of, a song here, a song there. And what the beauty of this latest recording is complete cycles, and to collaborate with Jessica on that level, and an artist of her caliber on that level, has really been a pinnacle.
Of course, for all of our careers.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us about what was your idea behind the repertoire that you chose? Of course, it is about the preferred repertoire and the favorite repertoire, Victoria. But why think of Jessica in?
For me, it was very logical, because it's like when we read Plutarch on the parallel lives, we have parallel voices. And again, Victoria was someone who was completely at ease performing in the operatic repertoire, doing everything from Bohème to Faust, even Wagner. And she also was a bit of a French leader, a French melody and German leader. And the same thing happens with Jessica. Victoria worked with many of the most important contemporary composers of Spain, and some in Mexico too, of her time, and also has been the inspiration, the muse of many great composers of our time, particularly John Adams. She's at home performing in opera at the Metropolitan, performing with orchestra, with the Berlin Philharmonic, New York or Boston, also performing with piano. And the secret of both voices, to my ears, built on the center of the register, the beauty at the center, not trying to push the metal in the high notes or the meaty low register, but the center. And that has allowed Victoria to have a very long career. One of her unforgettable performances was with her fellow Catalonian friend, and they had never sang together, Alicia de la Rocha, in New York College. And she even could sing roles of mezzo-soprano, although she was a lyric soprano. But tell us, I mean, Jessica, I mean, you are the star. Do these ideas make sense to you? Do you?
There's a couple of things that you said said that really were so affirming to me as an artist, and that is that starting from the center of the voice, our late voice teacher Nina Hinson would just kiss you for saying that, because that's what she really helped me develop in my voice. And one of the probably the best compliments I've received, my voice is even top to bottom. I can go in both directions, but that she really helped develop that middle voice that that is essential for an operatic singer. And so that's really wonderful to hear. I think also, in doing my research of Victoria, she did a recording of Carmen, which she wasn't allowed to sing. She never at the Met, but she felt like she wanted to do it. And that's something that's interesting too, that we share. I had an intendant tell me once, you have a very sufficient quality to your voice. He was originally from Germany. So I thought, wow, that's really interesting that I could sing, possibly mezzo soprano roles. But what's been interesting is that because I'm working with a lot of modern day contemporary composers, they're actually writing that whole range into the roles that I end up singing. So I'm kind of both at one time, which is nice to have it a little tailor-made. But
Definitely.
it will be interesting to see, how those roles are filled in the future. And I think it's wonderful to actually give a singer an opportunity to use their entire voice, not just, separate portions, or, all of us have such unique instruments anyway. I think it's, every composer, including Mozart, was writing for a specific. But I think it's really fun to be able to, when you have something written for you, that it is really tailor-made. And I do feel like some of the things that I have had written for me are like that. But even some of this repertoire that we chose for the disc is very much that for me. And some of the songs that I think the only thing that I was not very familiar with was the literes.
Yes.
Prior to this recording, but I had either performed or had performed one in the cycle. And I love that we included the Rodrigo, because my debut with the LA Philharmonic was in celebration of his centenary. And I met his daughter, and she introduced me to all of his repertoire. And I have, lots of scores of vocal music, both voice and piano, but voice and orchestra, and all of the recordings that were made. So that was a huge inspiration. So now to be able to have made a recording of some of those songs is wonderful. Also the Falla, of course, I've sung. I always joke with Mark, now what keys are we going to do it in this time?
A little bit about your Schwissen abilities when we recorded it in one key and then performed it in another key.
Oh.
Yes.
So I got to learn it twice.
Yes. Mark, thank you. This is why you are the pianist of choice. I mean, really.
Lucky you, Mark.
The other thing that amazes me of Victoria and amazes me of you and really moves both Marisa and me and the lucky people that listen to your singing to tears is how you manage air. Because the phrases seem to go forever, and you finish the phrase and the resonance keep sounding in our hearts and in our ears. And that again, is a characteristic of a good singer, that is not trying to belt it out or to make the walls fall like the trumpets in Jericho, but really to touch us through her artistry. Tell us more about that.
Wow, that's a beautiful compliment. I'll take it. I think now, I spend a lot of time teaching young singers how to do that. And it's not something that I mastered early. So it's something that really was a gradual process for me, and really came at Nina's, direction, and with her help, and learning how to use your entire body as your instrument, not just, it's your voice isn't just the two vocal cords that make the tone. The breath is the beginning of everything and the ending of it, and learning how to create the onset and create the release of the tone, and how that's just such a cyclical process.
Yes.
And how it never ends. And I think recently, actually it was a year ago around this time, I had done a tour with the great guitarist Sharon Isbin.
Oh, yes.
She was the reason that we learned the Defia in the other keys. Thank you, Mark. Because on guitar, she plays them in the mezzo keys. And so, and she had done a recording with Isabel Leonard, beautiful mezzo soprano. And we were we were performing actually in a temple, and I was warming up in a chapel area in the temple, and a Jewish temple. And I was doing some yoga breath because I was really trying to get into my body. And I don't know if I had either that morning, I popped on Facebook, and I think somebody had said something about our breath being an extension of the breath that God has given us through creating us. And it was just like the whole experience was kind of mind blowing, because I'm doing yoga in a chapel, Jewish chapel, temple. And then I'm having this whole sort of like existential experience about how when you actually breathe, and the sound of breath is, and the word Yahweh is those sounds. And I had never understood that or heard that, but it was like, wow, like I've always felt like I am a vessel for music, but literally my body is a vessel for breath, and the breath of life, and that life I give to the music, which is a gift to the people who hear it, which is, so it's this very integrated, collaborative thing that happens. And we want it as singers, I think, to be as natural as possible. And so for me, learning how to make that part of my body, part of my actual literal rhythm, and in a way that allows me to use it efficiently, but emotionally and spiritually, to give to somebody else, and to really interpret these incredible pieces of music in a way that resonates as the composer intended. Yeah.
The way you have put this, it's beautifully wrapped. I mean, the whole experience of moving your audience to tears is one that we are very used to. Seriously, you have, in the middle of a recording in which I should be completely focused on the intellectual part of it and just listen little details, sometimes I have to stop, and I realize that I have my eyes pulling, and it's really, I see why now, because you have this amazing conception of what it is, the connection between your spirituality and the music that you communicate to the world. And the fact that Mark understands this and does the support of it in such a way that complements it is just, and seriously, guys, I mean, you are truly one of my favorite artists in this whole world.
And Mark, I wanted to ask you, I mean, in this wonderful recording, you perform music by three of the greatest piano composers of Spain, Falla, Granados, and Turina. But their technique and challenges are very difficult and very different. In case of Turina, everything is very brilliant. It falls well in the hand. You jump octaves. You have to control the volume. In case of vital details. And in the case of Granados, well, he was a poet of the piano. I think he's the closest, with notes that have to keep sounding for 15 bars and you play the inner voices. Tell us about all the beauty and challenges of these wonderful composers who are also great pianists.
Yeah, of the three of them, I think what has presented for me and continues to present to me the greatest challenge are the Defaya songs, because they're probably the most orchestral of them all, although he did set it for piano. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when I would be practicing them, especially when I got to learn them in another key,
here we go again with the complaint.
Fishing.
Fishing.
I'm fishing for fishing. I would say to Jessica, I said, well, why don't we just do this? Why don't we do this one in this key and this one in the lower key? Because I was picking the ones that were easier for me under the hand to play. And then I tried it on my own and I said, my God, this sounds like Schoenberg. So I think that they required the most attention. The Turina was it was so natural, you know, and as well as the Granados. But for me, the Defaya are the ones that I continually go back to when I perform them with Jessica, and they take time and they take attention, because there are some things that are not the most pianistic, could be more pianistic for someone with longer, thinner fingers than mine. I have a short, fat hand, so I figure things differently and I have to finger things differently. And that was, for me, the biggest challenge, but I think it made me better at them in the end by doing, because when I listened to the recording, I wrote Marisa and I said, are you sure that's me?
Well, truly, the fact that you make it sound so easy, both of you, is misleading for the general public. Of course, we're musicians and we know what it entails, but it's amazing for the people who do not know to learn that it takes months and months of work to feel comfortable, to bring it into yourself, to bring yourself into it, and to just do it as the message that you want to communicate, rather than thinking of how to place this note or how to place this vowel or how to, it just has to be completely natural, and that takes time. Yeah. And considering that you both are incredibly busy with your lives now, both in academia, and you, Jessica, touring all over the world, it's amazing to me that you've been able to put all these things together with such care and with such attention for detail. So I can say very confidently that I know how perfect these performances are, because I am very picky as a producer.
Muchas tomas.
Not really, not so many.
Not so many. No, you're right.
It's true. It's not so many. And at the end of a recording session, we were all in such good spirits that we went back to our home and had large dinners.
It was wonderful.
I mean,
My
nobody
favorite
was.
memories, some of my favorite memories of our times together have been, you know, not just the music making part, but I think it's the relationship and the camaraderie and the fact that we share this incredible love and passion for what we know to be music and how we want to give that gift as beautifully and as well manicured and attention to detail as we can, because you know these things live on and they inform other people. You know, I had a student recently in the last week ask me about a Turina song which I had never heard of. She found a recording of a beautiful soprano from Europe, and she said, I'd really like to try this song. I said, fabulous. So I love being able to put things like this out into the world and allow people to discover them, and then you know they send us little notes and say, oh, I'd like to try to perform this, but you know it's we usually are calling Ellie because those Mexican songs from our first disc, you know, are some of the jewels that were, you know, not known to us until she introduced us. And then, you know, it goes out in the world and just becomes a blessing to other people. And I'm so thankful that we've had the opportunity to do that, especially with, you know, some of these chosen pieces. You know, one of the last times that Mark and I were together with my voice teacher Nina, and we stayed with her and her neighbor. She hosted or curated a gala for the Desert Chorale in Santa Fe. She was on the board of the Desert Chorale, and she had Mark and I come in, and we were the special guests. And so we curated, of course, things from all of our discs. And one of them was the Del Cabello Más Sutil. And that was, I mean, I remember hearing that song for the first time on a disc by Arlene Auger, who's my all-time favorite. You know, she and I are both Southern California girls. And but just to hear that music was transporting and transforming. And so having the chance to work that with Nina and then have it on this recording is just really a tribute to her. And also this I know when we were recording it back in August of 2019, those were, we didn't know it at the time, but those were the last months that our friend Kristen Rothfuss was going to be with us. And she was such a help to us in our first project.
Yes.
All the German songs.
Yes. I remember she flew into Mexico City when, yeah,
the Spor and
Shepherd Rock.
Yes, der Hirt auf dem Felsen. Yes, she'd appreciate that I can say it. But I'm so, you know, going back and remembering these times that we've had together brings back some of my favorite experiences and with my favorite people. So
that's lovely.
Very special. I'm really, really excited for this to finally be out in the world, and that we had the opportunity to do it. And it won't be the last one, even though
not, definitely not. And I am taking your word and make it known to the public, to the audience all over the place, that you have already committed to do a next one.
Well, Mark and I were together this last weekend in Pittsburgh preparing for the concert that we'll do together in a month's time, and some of the selections off of this in celebration of this release. But we already had a few ideas about the next, you know, what the next disc will hold.
Nice.
What we'd like to do. So we'll discuss that.
Okay. We'll talk about it, of course.
Over one of our favorite meals.
Benjamin, just a word on about how Jessica's voice begins at the middle and extends outward. There's a mezzo soprano who's still living. She's 99. She was born in 1924. Her name is Mildred Miller.
Oh, yes.
And she was a great mezzo from the last century. And she's still living here in Pittsburgh.
Ah,
And she fell in about 5 years ago. You know how in working with singers for the past 28 years, young singers, you know, building recital programs and choosing repertoire and so forth, her words ring in my ear, you know, when you've got this wonderful soprano who wants to just scream out as many B flats as she can during a recital. She says, "How many of those are you going to hit the audience with, honey? How many do you think they can take?"
They're aggressive, isn't it?
But they got it.
I think another, but now that you mentioned her, I remember another great method I had the pleasure of meeting several times, and who was married to a composer. Her name was Katy Berberian, and the composer for a time was Luciano Berio, and he made an orchestration, 7 songs of Aya for her. But in her voice, what again I find another parallels. She was just as performing Monteverdi and Baroque music with Nicholas Harnoncourt, or performing Stripsody a cappella, or performing the Manuel de Falla or songs from Azerbaijan.
Yeah, true crossover.
It has roots in like a folk voice, something very natural, very close to speech. And now when we see the huge number of, and the leadership of artists, singers, conductors, composers from Spanish-speaking countries, like now that Duda anointed as the next conductor of the New York Philharmonic, and he's bringing with him another repertoire, I think that you are doing the same. And I wonder if what is important is not only for people with Spanish heritage, Latinx, whatever you want to call them, to perform this repertoire, but just as we perform Puccini or Schubert or Beethoven, we want artists from China or Italy or the US to perform this repertoire and make it part of the canon, make it part of the core.
Absolutely.
100% agreed. And I think that's, if I can contribute one thing to the world of music through these last 3 recordings, it is just that these pieces that nobody would have known. And I remember Nina saying that was part of her discovery as a master's student, that she did these songs, and she would introduce me to some of this repertoire that she's like, nobody knows these songs. and so it made me feel like I had something special, but also because I had a special connection through my heritage. You know, growing up in the United States and not with my father, because my parents were divorced when I was very young, that I was always searching for something that told me who I was, who I am.
Connected you to your father.
Yes. And so it's been such a wonderful journey for me to discover it, but also, like I said, to give it to other people. I'm now assigning these songs to some of my students, and have been encouraged by my colleagues to actually present, you know, a project for them that helps them learn this entire, like you say, it's a canon unto itself.
Of course.
To add it to the larger canon of art song as we know it, and you know, these incredible, you know, folk song roots in certain ways extremely legitimate as classical, as we know classical music to be. So it needs to exist out in the world. It needs to it needs to be heard, and I'm very grateful that we are able to offer it out as something that hopefully be around long after we're, you know, making music somewhere else.
Yes.
And heavenly harp.
I'm sure I've told you this during the recordings, because I always say it to any of the artists who's recording with me. I tell them, we have the problem of posterity. So we have to be really, really accurate, and we have to really be careful, because this is a legacy. It is a legacy. And it is, I have to be very, very careful, because this entails months or year of your life. Every note that you give me is a precious pearl that has that contains time and your lives in it. And I have to be really careful. And it's wonderful that we are able to put this out in the world and not worry any longer about posterity, because we did our best.
We did.
And
We
I
did.
I speak for Jessica when I thank you, Benjamin, and Urtex for memorializing us. I mean,
You deserve it. Very much so. Very much
well,
so.
I think it's symbiotic because we need each other.
Absolutely, yes. So I know you just explained, Jessica, your connection to Spanish, to the Spanish language. But Mark, you're also a Spanish language lover. And where does that connection come from?
Well, believe it or not, back in the third grade, yes, the third grade, we had a woman who would come in to class twice a week, and she would speak Spanish with us, conversational Spanish, for a half an hour or so. And we learned how to say hello. And her name was, I still remember, Señorita Naraki. And she would come in and she would write on the board just basic words in Spanish. So third, fourth, and fifth grade, we had conversational Spanish. And then in sixth and seventh, we learned just some basic grammar. So I already had like a 5-year foundation, and I had it in my ear. So then when I went to college, I studied it in college, and my Spanish professor said to me, she said, if I couldn't make more time to take more other than the year I took it. And she said, you could be like a native speaker, because she said, I think she said, when I remember her, exactly what she said, she said, she thinks it's my musical ear that helps me. She says, you almost sound like you have no accent at all. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, you should hear me after a couple of coronas. It starts to melt.
I remember, Jessica, that the very, very first time we met many, many years ago, I think it was before, was in San Francisco with John Adams, when you were premiering in the US, The Flowering Tree. And John Adams is the same as your experience, Mark. I mean, he had to travel, leave New England, and go all across the United States to California. And he told me the greatest gift is to really be part of this different culture. And in El Niño, in Flowering Tree, he uses the Spanish language with a fantastic fluidity and respect and care that just underlines what is very clear for me, that the United States is part of Latin America, that the close to 50 million of people with Spanish-speaking heritage that live here are more than twice the people that live in Central America, or in many in South America. So that's just another richness that we have to celebrate now in these times of inclusion, diversity, and belonging.
And I think that it's one more reason why these type of recordings are so important, because there are so many people looking for their heritage, looking for their roots, and looking to connect to their cultures in a way that goes beyond the postcard of colors or mariachi or, whatever is in the different Latin American countries or Hispanic countries, Spanish-speaking countries. And so I think that we should congratulate ourselves, because we did something really fantastic. And as you said, Jessica, there is more to come. Do you want to add something to this, to add a last
well, the only thing
comment?
I wanted to just add to what you had asked me before about my love of Spanish is that other than my connection with Urtext, I've also had a liaison with Toreo Nacional. In the 4 summers that I did a residency down there for a masterclass, the Curso Magistral in honor of Irma Gonzalez.
Yes.
And it was just a beautiful experience every summer for me to go down there for a month and work with that wonderful talent, playing so much wonderful Spanish and Mexican music. And it just deepened my experience with the language and with the people. If I could just if I could get Carnegie Mellon University to give me a sabbatical so I could live in Mexico City for a year, I could promise them I'd come back fluent.
I'm sure they are very interested in that.
Make sure this goes worldwide.
Yes.
We will.
Well, maybe we'll have to do a dual sabbatical, because
Okay.
one of the things that, because, in finding myself, and I grew up same like you, because of the musicality that rolls around in my head as part of who I am, my DNA, I also have that sort of affinity for pronunciation for languages that in most cases turns out to sound pretty native. And in fact, one of the best comp I had received was from one of the stagehands at the Teatro Real in Spain, in Madrid. And we were doing Aina de Mar, Osvaldo Goliov's Aina de Mar, and I was singing Margarita. And he came up to me after one of the dress rehearsals and said, "I would never know that you were not from here." And I was yay, because it had been my dream actually to study in Spain. I wanted to study zarzuela and Fulbright and go, but I ended up getting a job with LA Opera instead. So I thought, well, I have a job. I just feel like this is, such a, and that I don't think it's never too late to start really learning and doing it well. And now that I have 2 little kiddos, it is my hope to take them to Peru a lot earlier than I went. I took my dad for my 30th birthday, which was, minutes ago.
Yes.
But I want to take my kiddos for my next big birthday, a couple of years to introduce them. And so we're already starting, I call my daughter, her name's Rachel, but I call her Raquelito Bonita. It's become her handle on some of her video games and things like that. And
I have one of her original artworks on my refrigerator too.
Yeah. Artist. And then I call my son's name is Reed, but I call him Rito Burrito. Kind of like one of those revueltas.
Yes, of course.
Funny little things. But I want them to know that this is a part of who they are, and that we all can develop an appreciation for everyone's world, because we all love something, right? And that we can learn how to appreciate that in other people. And I think that I think moving forward, that has become part of my charge, is to be able to, like you say, Benjamin, in this era of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I have, that's always been a part of, since I was a young child, I've always felt that way. And maybe it's because I learned a little song about how Jesus loved all the children of the world, every color, every creed. And so I always important that we should always look as a human being, not just an ethnicity or a race or a color, but that everything that made the world a better place because we all had something unique and beautiful to share. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to do that through this work that we do together. So I think it's
diversity and inclusion is such a wonderful thing that has become so integral to our world, and in my case, in the academic world at Carnegie Mellon. Now there are no such thing on campus as men's room or women's rooms. You go where you want. And I'm thinking, what is the big fuss about this? When I was a piano student in Nice in 1975, that's what you did. You just went to the restroom. It didn't matter. And I'm thinking, why is there such a fuss about this? I was doing this in 1970. So, I think it's good to kind of getting on board. And I say, or get out.
That's not inclusive, Mark.
That's rather exclusive.
What is important is that when we talk about politics or when we talk about religion, we are in difficult waters. But when we talk about music and we talk about food, or even some people would include chocolate and drinks, then that invites us to be together. And music heals. Also, the fact that you did this recording right a little bit after the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, when many of the activities had stopped.
No, before the pandemic.
Right before the pandemic, but still, I mean, already the hall at Harvard University was free because of issues with COVID, and music heals. And after the pandemic, I mean, we want to dance together, to be together, to feel together, and music heals, and music puts us in contact with transcendence, which is what you do. I think that listening to you is like meditating, and when you meditate and you focus on your you really get into very interesting places, and that's what we get, that sense of being close to the transcendent that is not part of this world, but that special place where we are in touch with what goes outside of our everyday life and our difficulties, our disease, or our worries, and we connect with beauty, with other generations,
with the eternal.
With the eternal.
Thank you very much. This has been delightful as always, and I look forward to our next plans. Please tell our audience what your next concert will be.
So the next concert that we will have together will be at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. So it's Miami of Ohio. I've learned that it has to be a distinction versus, and Mark is coming to play, and we will be giving that concert on Sunday, March 5th at Sowers Recital Hall, and we will be doing the Defaya. We're also going to be doing some works by, let's see, we're doing Estrellita, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did on one of our
previous discs, yes.
And we're doing Lua Descolorida by
nice.
Solyov, and we're doing a piece by Tanya Leon from her opera, The Scourge of Hyacinths, called O Yemanja, the soprano aria, and a few other songs that a couple by Ginastera, and then one by, let's see, Chavez, right? The North Carolina Blues, which I actually discovered the Urtex disc by another artist. And I thought, oh, this is how this song goes, because I'd never heard of it before. But I'm doing a tour the week after Mark and I do this recital with the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center.
Oh, wonderful.
5-city tour. And so that concert is called Voices of the Americas. And so, of course, a lot of music from Central, South America, and Mexico, and also from Spain. So I just wanted to have an opportunity to perform that as well. And so we have it's a really lovely recital, and I'm grateful that Mark will come along and play with me.
So there you have it. Look up at the schedules of Jessica and Mark, and if you're in the neighborhood, please don't miss it. Thank you again so much for being with us tonight, and for making this first Martes con Marisa of 2023 a really delightful evening. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Besos para todos.
Huyendo, con dichoso que no